We would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land on which the university stands. We respectfully recognise elders past, present and future. Welcome to Newsline.
Brought to you live from the Media Precinct in RMIT, Melbourne.
Hello and welcome to Newsline. I'm Sarah Liversidge.
And I'm Jordan Zock. Today on the program, we'll be having a look at the Victorian Socialist campaign efforts, the celebration of international students and trans mental health.
We'll also have updates across sports, international affairs and weather. First to today's headlines. Free flu vaccinations may soon be available for Victorians as the state government looks to ease the pressure on the struggling ambulance system. Over 10,000 Victorians have been diagnosed with the flu this year and more than 100 people have been hospitalised. This adds to pressure on hospitals already dealing with hundreds of coronavirus infections. Premier Daniel Andrews says his government is in talks with the Pharmacy Guild and the Australian Medical Association and is expected to make an announcement on any changes soon. The push comes after hospital emergency departments and paramedics continue to feel the crunch and reach capacity at alarming rates.
Outgoing Defence Minister Peter Dutton has formally confirmed he will stand for the leadership of the Liberal Party. Dutton has pledged to bring together moderate and conservative wings of the party following the party's historic defeat at last Saturday's election. Liberal MP Karen Andrews says Dutton will most likely be elected as no one else is intending to run for the role. It comes after former Prime Minister Scott Morrison resigned from the leadership of the party after conceding the election. Liberal MP Susan Ley is the current frontrunner for Deputy Leader.
National Reconciliation Week begins today. May 26 is National Sorry Day, an acknowledgement of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who were forcibly removed from their families and communities, which is known as the Stolen Generations. Today also marks the 5th anniversary of the Uluru Statement of the Heart, which calls for a constitutionally enshrined Indigenous voice to Parliament. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has committed to implementing the statement in full.
Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong is flying to Fiji today as part of the Labor government's intention to rebuild a diplomatic presence in the Pacific region. Senator Wong makes the trip less than 24 hours after returning from the Quad leaders meeting in Tokyo alongside Anthony Albanese. Wong says she hopes Australia can work together with Pacific nations to tackle issues of climate change, pandemic recovery and regional security. The visit will also coincide with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi's tour of the Pacific nation, which has already drawn criticism for an attempt by Beijing to restrict media access at a press event in the Solomon Islands.
Prime Minister-elect Anthony Albanese appeared on ABC News Breakfast this morning, urging American politicians to take action to curb gun violence. His comments come after 18-year-old gunmen killed at least 21 people, including 19 children, at a Texas primary school on Tuesday. During his interview with ABC, Albanese paid tribute to former Prime Minister John Howard, who led gun reform in Australia following the Port Arthur massacre in 1996. Albanese went on to appeal to Joe Biden to help enact change, believing it is astonishing that such tragedies continue to occur. More on this story coming up.
This is an atrocity that just keeps happening in the United States. 19 children and 2 teachers slaughtered with an automatic weapon. It is just astonishing that it continues to happen.
Like, it was 2:30 and then it was 4 and I was like, what the hell? I thought we'd have time for like
It'll be really interesting to see what they have to say.
That's me.
seen them out and about, and yeah, a lot of interesting revelations at the election this year, and we continue to see those things playing out.
I found it interesting to see as well a lot of the minor parties starting to come through, and more of the independents as well. The Greens starting to, come up and get a lot more votes. Okay, so reporter Tom Paisley went down to Thornbury's Salvation Army Hall in the Cooper electorate where pre-polling was taking place.
In a package, give me 2 minutes.
We're here today outside Thornbury's Salvation Army Hall, where election day is looming and pre-polling efforts are in full swing. We've come to have a talk with some of the Victorian Socialists volunteers to see how they hope their election campaign might fare this year. A relatively new party, only on the electoral roll for 4 years, they're hopeful that this election they might lay the groundwork for a future in politics.
This federal election campaign for Victorian Socialists is a bit different from the last one. The last one we ran in 4 seats and this one we're running in 11, so it's quite a bit more ambitious. The way we see the federal election is more as preparation for the state campaign in November, which we think that we have a really good chance of winning. The last time we ran in the state election, we came 4th in the Northern Metro on first preference votes, and we just lost because of preference deals. So this is really more about laying the basis for a victory in the state election.
We basically run on volunteers, and our volunteers have been incredibly helpful for our campaign in doing door knocking, chatting to people on their doorstep about the issues that concern them, letterboxing. We've actually just completed letterboxing and door knocking in the entirety of the Cooper electorate, which is tens of thousands of homes and tens of thousands of people we've spoken to about socialist politics. The rich are continuing to get richer and the poor are continuing to get poorer. Our living standards are declining, like the inflation crisis basically at the moment now, the cost of living, all that stuff's going up, but our wages have been stagnant for so long now. All this work we're doing right now for the federal election, all the hours we're putting into campaigning, into volunteering, and just speaking to people about socialist politics, that it will be, putting us in good footing, basically, to make a real impact to get the first Victorian socialist, senator elected in the state parliament in Victoria later this year.
While the Victorian Socialists are still a relatively young and up-and-coming political party, they do seem to be accounting for the future, in positioning themselves as an alternative to the established political parties we're also familiar with. This has been Tom Paisley for Channel 31's Newsline, signing off.
We're heading to a short break now. Coming up, we'll be hearing about the sustainable work of the Melbourne farmers markets. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Newsline. The discussion around climate change can be overwhelming, and it can be difficult to know how to do your part. The Alphington-based social enterprise Melbourne Farmers Markets is working towards sustainable ways to bring food to communities and those in need, as well as provide small ways for people to tackle climate change. Bridget Murphy reports.
Of Melbourne, a food and sustainability community has grown. The Alphington Food Hub is home to the Melbourne Farmers Market, an organisation that puts local farmers at the centre, allowing them a space to grow, store and sell their produce locally and directly to consumers. Miranda Sharp is the founder and director of Melbourne Farmers Markets.
We've created now what is Alphington Community Food Hub, which hosts not only the weekly farmers market, but we've built out from the old degraded sort of infrastructure that was here, a fully registered community kitchen, a cool room and storage facility for farmers to be able to access to do business in Melbourne.
A big part of what drives the people working with Melbourne Farmers Markets is taking steps to sustainable living and tackling climate change. Holly Gallagher, a local urban farmer working in Alphington, says climate change is already affecting our food system and will continue to do so.
The climate crisis is going to have a huge effect on the way we eat, the way we get food into our cities. It's going to affect agriculture. It already is. We need to take more care of our soils and how we're growing foods.
The people working and growing here believe it's the little things that can make a difference. Individual people and communities taking small steps to tackle climate change.
I think it's easy to look at the big things that are happening, but if we didn't have all of the many little things that that people are doing every day, if we didn't have them, then our future would be a lot bleaker.
Bridget Murphy for RMIT Newsline.
And now we have Matilda Anderson joining us for international news.
The Quad Summit took place in Tokyo on Tuesday. The leaders of Australia, India, Japan and the US have vowed a $50 billion investment into infrastructure in the Indo-Pacific over the next 5 years. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has been proclaimed the next president of the Philippines. A landslide election triumph 36 years after his dictator father was ousted in a pro-democracy uprising. Yesterday's tragic mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Texas is the deadliest school shooting since Sandy Hook in 2012. The massacre, claiming the lives of 19 children and 2 adults, is the 248th mass shooting in the US this year. President Joe Biden is calling for more sensible gun laws, while Texas Senator Ted Cruz suggests putting armed law enforcement on campuses. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has apologised for illegal lockdown gatherings. A report investigated numerous parties that took place under his watch during COVID-19 restrictions.
So Matilda, what are the key findings from this report?
So Sue Gray, a respected senior civil servant, compiled a report investigating the context of 15 events between May 2020 and April 2021. These involved Parliament staff gatherings during lockdown restrictions, and Boris Johnson was found to be in attendance of 8 of these parties.
Matilda, can you tell us what the report has achieved?
The investigation began with just 3 events, but over the past year, a further 13 events were made apparent to Ms Gray. So the first achievement would be a thorough investigation into the conduct of the British government, who have been found to be drunken and rowdy, having parties to 3 and 4 in the morning, and on one occasion, having an altercation that led to 1 attendee being thrown out. There was also the finding that many of the staff members have admitted they knew that they were doing the wrong thing. Yesterday, the revised, published 60-page investigation had to first be presented to Met Police, who last week issued 126 fines to partygoers.
So what does this mean for Boris Johnson?
Well, opposition parties have been calling for his resignation since the scandal broke, but it wasn't until mid-January, when further details arose, that people from his own party also began to call for him to step down. A handful of Conservative PMs have sent in letters saying they had lost confidence in the Prime Minister, but it was short of the 54 letters needed for there to be a trigger of vote of no confidence. And also, since photos of the PM toasting his colleagues while the rest of the country were in lockdown emerged on Monday, I can imagine the anger from the public in Britain at the moment. Boris Johnson has since said he takes full responsibility for everything that took place on his watch.
Thanks for that, Matilda.
According to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, international students make up 25% of people enrolled in Australian universities. And now they're being celebrated for their contribution to Australia. Hugh Pearson reports.
Melbourne's inaugural International Student Festival kicked off earlier this month. The festival, hosted by Global Victoria and Study Melbourne, aims to celebrate and support international students that call Melbourne home.
This is, now with borders reopening, this is a really great opportunity to, welcome students back and just to really, celebrate the significant contribution they make to our state.
International students are incredibly important to Australia. According to a study done by the Department of Education, Skills and Employment, international students contribute $18 billion annually, but experts say their contribution doesn't stop there.
What they do is that they gain experience in terms of an education in a different country. But at the same time, domestic students also gain from international students because they are then exposed to cultures, to people, to societies which are really different from their own.
Countries often improve their diplomatic relationships due to international students. Indonesia's former Foreign Minister, Marty Natalegawa, obtained his doctorate at the Australian National University and helped put the bilateral relationship between Indonesia and Australia on better footing, and there are thousands more like him. Australia will be eager to let more international students through its doors. 440,129 international students were enrolled from January to March this year. That's a change of negative 15% compared to the same period of time the year before. Associate Professor Catherine Gomez said it'll be important to adjust and accommodate international students who are looking at studying in Australia post-COVID.
Going forward, what happens is that we need to actually now understand what students and their parents are looking for in terms of international, studying overseas.
Hugh Pearson for RMIT Newsline.
We're now being joined by our reporter Lillian Bernhardt, who will be chatting to Sav Zwickel, a member of the University of Melbourne's Trans Health Research Group. They'll be discussing the mental health crisis occurring within the transgender community.
For viewer discretion, we would like to let you know that we will be discussing sensitive topics regarding mental health. Welcome to Newsline. Thank you for joining us today. You're a lead researcher of the report Trans in the Pandemic, which revealed some concerning results about the impact of COVID-19 on mental health in the trans community. Could you please tell me a bit about this study and your research goals?
Yeah, so we released a report called Trans in the Pandemic earlier this month, and that was the culmination of 2 years of work by the Trans Health Research Group. So when the pandemic first started in March 2020 and social restrictions came into play, we suspected that the trans community as a minority group that are already discriminated against and face barriers to healthcare would likely be disproportionately affected by social restrictions. And we ended up surveying just over 1,000 trans and gender diverse people. And one of the key findings from that was that over 60% were experiencing clinically significant levels of depression. And those levels are far higher than what the trans community were experiencing before the pandemic and almost double what the general population were experiencing in the early stages of the pandemic. So with those findings, we knew that, that was something incredibly important to be shared. And so we took that research to everyone we could think of in terms of government, mental health organisations nationally and LGBTI organisations as well, knowing they could use that research to support their request for more funding and research in what is a mental health crisis.
Your report found the rates of clinical depression within the trans community to be double that of the national rate. What are some of the reasons for this?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to recognise, firstly, that being transgender is not a pathology, it's not a mental health disorder. And that's something that's recognised by the World Health Organization, the American Psychiatric Association, and most key health organisations internationally. But the trans community does experience a lot of mental health difficulties, particularly around depression and anxiety. And that is in large part due to social discrimination. So, you know, for younger trans people, that might be bullying and social isolation in schools. And, you know, growing up and into adulthood, difficulty finding employment. So trans people are 3 times more likely than the general population to experience unemployment because of discrimination, as well as street harassment and violence. So many trans people fear that something will happen to them every single time they step out of their house. And that, not surprisingly, leads to these really high rates of mental health and depression that we see in the trans community.
In your report, you say that many trans people are unwilling to access mainstream mental health services. Why do you think this is the case?
Yeah, so what we found, given that you've got 60% of people experiencing clinically significant levels of depression, there are a lot of people really needing mental health support. We found that over 1/3 had accessed a mental health professional in the early stages of the pandemic. About 1 in 5 had accessed an LGBTI organisation, and only 1 in 10 had accessed a mainstream organisation like Lifeline or Beyond Blue. And that trend to access LGBTI organisations over mainstream is something that's seen across other research as well. And it's in large part due to the lack of training that mental health professionals have around how to talk appropriately and sensitively to trans people, and an understanding of what the issues are that trans people face. And so there's this fear of discrimination when trying to access a mental health service. And the last thing that a trans person wants in a moment of mental health crisis is to face discrimination, to face misgendering, which is likely to exacerbate distress in a moment of crisis.
Thank you so much for your time today. We'll have more after the break.
No worries.
Cue.
Welcome back to Newsline. I'm Jordan Zock. Construction workers in Victoria will be banned from redeveloping the Curtin Hotel as part of a union-led protection of the venue. But the owners say the green ban is protecting a lot more than another Carlton pub. Here's Adrian Williams with the story.
With the 2022 federal election passing this weekend, Australians have seen a change in government. But despite taking office and a significant increase in Victoria's votes, one of the ALP's oldest seats is under threat. Fondly joked at being former Prime Minister Bob Hawke's second office, the John Curtin Hotel was sold late last year to an offshore developer. News of the development has resulted in public protest and a green ban being commissioned by the Victorian Trade Union in an effort to save the venue.
We've got a fantastic relationship with us and them, and they've enacted the green ban, so that happened a couple of Fridays ago, which is huge. I mean, that hasn't been done, you probably know, since something like 1976, 79, when Frank Sinatra was in town. For us to kind of get that sort of recognition and that support is really, really overwhelming. I think with their help, there's still a little bit to play out in the future of the Curtin.
Working at the venue for over a decade, Rusty says the strength of the support is reflective of not just the Victorian Trade Union's efforts, but the inclusive environment that the Curtin has helped to build over its lifetime, and that losing it would cost the community a lot more than its sticker price.
People really had a home here from all walks of life, and it's something I sort of connected with as well, and kind of sort of could see that there was something a bit more special about this place.
Despite having a history with the Australian Labor Party that stretches past a century, the Curtin is best known within the community for its commitment to live music. Speaking to CEO of Music Victoria, Simone Schnickel, Simone says that losing the venue would be another impact to the live music in the city after the COVID pandemic.
The biggest learning is just how vulnerable we are, in those sorts of periods of time, and particularly our musicians. We just didn't fit nicely into any box. The scene that we're proud to have for music in Victoria, that doesn't just happen by accident or overnight. It's something that you need all layers functioning effectively. And it's been such a great host to lots of First Nations voices before anyone else was giving them a stage. So yeah, places like that you have to look after. And so that's why we're fighting.
Aidan Williams, RMIT Newsline, Melbourne.
National Reconciliation Week begins officially today, and we've sent reporter Tom Paisley to WeWork's pop-up market in Melbourne CBD, celebrating First Nations designers to see how they've been preparing.
What's happening at the pop-up event, Tom?
Hi everybody. So I'm here today at a Reconciliation Week pop-up market hosted by WeWork in association with Newsline, a non-profit established to support First Nations people in their business and entrepreneurial ventures. Tonight's event is a celebration of excellence among Victorians' First Nations people, featuring an array of local artists, designers and campaigners. Whilst you couldn't be here this evening, Newsline's Partnerships Manager Shelley Wills, who I spoke with earlier today, encourages everyone and anyone interested to follow Newsline on social media and get behind their work supporting the First Nations economy this National Reconciliation Week. I have with me here the Area Director for WeWork, Paula, who will be here in just one moment. Oh, sorry, Paula, could you come? Sorry.
So Tom, what's the atmosphere in there like? How's the feeling?
WeWork's Area Director, Paula, who's here to speak with us for a moment. Hi there, Paula. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Tom.
So could you please tell us about what today's event means for WeWork and your association with the Newsline?
Absolutely. So at the heart of everything that WeWork does is community and bringing people together. We've created these incredible spaces for that purpose, to bring people and businesses together to allow them to do their best work. Yeah. And what better opportunity to bring the community together than a special event like Reconciliation Week. So we've partnered with Shelley and the Narrabri organisation to organise this pop-up today to give exposure both to the small businesses and to bring our communities together.
Fantastic. And Paula, could you just tell me a little bit about the vibe here tonight? I mean, the atmosphere seems like it's starting to pick up, and we see a lot of the attendees here are starting to set up their stalls.
Absolutely. I think we're so excited to be able to bring people back and welcome them back into the space. We've all worked from home for such a long time, and to be able to be together in person, I think is truly special and unique. And it's definitely getting busier. The sun is shining, and yeah, what a wonderful.
So we're starting up here at 4:30 today, and it's going to go on into the evening. Are you looking forward to having a nice night with everybody?
Absolutely. Our members will probably finish work soon,
Yeah.
so we'll see them come up. But yeah, we're so grateful as well for the small businesses to come and want to be in our schools.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Oh, well, thank you very much, Carla.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Tom. Please stay with us.
So what do you reckon about the event that Tom's at? How do you think it will go?
Oh, it'd be really interesting to see. It sounds like it'd be a great night.
Might have to head down there after the session.
Just going to a quick break now, and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back to Newsline. Now it's time for sport with reporter Freya O'Donnell joining us for the latest updates.
In line with Reconciliation Week, News Corp Australia commenced its second annual Indigenous Sports Month last week, opening with the annual NRL and AFL Indigenous rounds, which is a key focus. We've had 2 weeks of AFL through the Sir Douglas Nicholls Indigenous rounds, which has seen Melbourne Football Club rebrand as NARM for the duration, and teams celebrating Indigenous art through new jerseys for rounds 10 and 11. Indigenous Sports Month aims to highlight and celebrate Indigenous Australians' participation and excellence in sport, focusing this year on the next generation of Indigenous sports stars with ambassadors Ash Barty and Greg Inglis. In tennis, Nick Kyrgios has labelled Bernard Tomic as the most hated athlete in Australia. Australian bad boy duo Tomic and Kyrgios have taken their rivalry online in response to a fan who claimed Tomic is better than Kyrgios. Kyrgios clapped back, leading to a public argument on Instagram on who is richer and has more talent. This coincides with the Roland Garros French Open, of which both athletes have skipped out on competing in, 2022 being the 5th year consecutively Kyrgios has missed. In AFL, North Melbourne have faced 3 resignations after comments from footy classifieds Kane Corn. North Melbourne's tragic season has worsened with the string of 2 key recruits resigning. During a broadcast, Corn placed the blame for North Melbourne's dire run on Glenn Luff, who was in charge of recruitment. Caroline Wilson and Eddie Maguire told Footy Classified on Wednesday night Luff had resigned as a result of Corn's comments. That's all for sport. Back to you, Sarah and Jordan.
Melbourne Knowledge Week took place from the 9th to the 15th of May, with some exciting developments for those interested in climate solutions and the technological sphere. Michaela Toga went down to the CBD to participate in the fun and be part of climate solutions and the technological sphere.
Melbourne Knowledge Week is back in the city's CBD, this time with the dual name of Naam Nagu, acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. With over 100 events open to the general public, this year's showcase explores the consequences of relying too heavily on technology.
If computation keeps growing to 70%, obviously there's the increase in energy that we're going to, the companies at, then we're going to get to a time where we just can't make enough energy, we can't generate enough energy to meet the energy demand that comes from that computation.
The event hopes to generate discussion around technological dependence and how it can be harnessed to improve modern lives. Lord Mayor Sally Capp wants this to be a learning experience for those who call Melbourne home.
We are delighted to really showcase our city as a global knowledge city, a place where curiosity and creativity is treasured, it is nurtured, and then of course it is leveraged for great outcomes for our city, our community and beyond.
Surveys gathered by event holders show most Melburnians are unaware of the problems caused by technology they use in their everyday lives. Scientists, however, are working hard to resolve the issues caused by these modern luxuries.
Companies like Fleet are working to harness new power sources in order to replace the need for the silicon chip entirely. This will ensure the time won't come where hospitals have to pick and choose which life-saving tools they can use. Michaela Tor, Newsline.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Roundup. I'm Tiana Condren.
And I'm Rachel Jackson.
We're going to be taking a look at some of the biggest stories across tech, arts and in the papers. But first, let's take a look at today's headlines across the globe.
The New York Times front page features stories on Tuesday's Texas mass school shooting. 19 children and 2 adults were killed in the attack at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde. The 18-year-old gunman was armed with several weapons and died at the scene.
The South China Morning Post is reporting that a record number of graduates are set to enter the job market in China this year. The unemployment rate for those aged between 16 and 24 hit a record 18.2% in April, sparking what is said to be the most difficult summer to find a job in China.
Al Jazeera is reporting that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has rejected suggestions from Western leaders to seize control of areas occupied by Russian forces. Al Jazeera is also covering World Bank President David Malpass's claim that the war on Ukraine and its effects on food and energy prices could trigger a global recession.
In the United Kingdom, The Guardian is reporting that 7 more cases of monkeypox have been confirmed in England, bringing the UK total to 78. Scientists have said the virus may have been circulating unseen for several years.
The front page of the Indian national daily, The Hindu, features the sentencing of Kashmiri separatist leader Yasmin Malik for a terror funding case. Sentenced to life imprisonment, the sentencing has triggered a spontaneous shutdown of the main markets in Srinagar and a strong political reaction in Jammu and Kashmir. Mobile internet was suspended in parts of Kashmir Valley as a precautionary measure.
And that's it for today's front page world news. Let's turn to the latest news in tech, the arts and political satire.
An investigation by Human Rights Watch has revealed data tracking of millions of Australian school students during last year's COVID lockdowns. Tom Cutbush is here to tell us more.
Hello. Yes, so Human Rights Watch analysed 164
websites and apps used in 49 countries, and 13 international media outlets were given data that showed that these online learning websites and apps were hacked and tracking their students.
That's really unsettling to hear, honestly. I heard that 400 million Australian students
4 million.
Sorry, 4 million Australian students were actually involved in the risk.
Yeah.
What was the extent of the privacy breach?
4 million Australian students, it's a lot of students. 89% of the education technology products used globally could put these children and uni students at privacy at risk. Despite international privacy obligations, these products gained access to students' location, contacts, and keystrokes. So it's really concerning. And Human Rights Watch will release their full report and findings on the 8th of June.
Well, it's definitely something I think we need to be keeping an eye on in the future. So thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks. The Italian police have uncovered a lost painting from the 16th century that disappeared almost 20 years ago. Joining us now is India Curtin to tell us more. Now, India, the illegal trade of artwork is quite common, so why did the police find this specific painting?
So this artwork by Renaissance painter Titian was recovered by Italian police by the Cultural Heritage Unit, by the Italian Cultural Heritage Unit. It's called Carbientere. They got an anonymous tip that the painting was in a workshop in Piedmont region in northwestern Italy. Then it was presented in an official ceremony on May 19. The Carbientere has now recovered 10,000 paintings over 26 countries and in 50 years.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the painting itself?
So the portrait's called The Portrait of a Man in a Beret, and it's actually valued at over $7 million. And the authorities believe that it was exported illegally in Switzerland 2 decades ago, and now 2 Swiss citizens are currently undergoing an investigation over the disappearance.
And on to our next story, which is a little closer to home. A Broadway musical show casting a modern rendition of Cinderella has come to Australia. Now, the classic tale has a contemporary twist. Can you tell us about that one, India?
So finally, this award-winning musical by Douglas Carter Bean has finally reached Australian soil after its debut in Broadway in 2013. So composers Rogers and Hammerstein actually wrote the music for this piece for television in the 50s. This rendition of Cinderella is focused around Cinderella's empowerment, and she's in charge of her own destiny, and it's very much more female oriented. If you guys are interested, there are tickets currently available for Melbourne's Regent Theatre.
The arts sector must be excited to see theatre return after the COVID-19 pandemic. Is COVID still an issue at all?
That's right, Rachel. Well, this highly anticipated musical was set to commence in 2021, but of course was delayed due to COVID-19 restrictions. We saw many delays late last year in other shows such as Hamilton, Queen Lear and Frozen, which were all closed due to outbreaks among the actual cast members. But regardless, it's great to see the theatres open up again this year.
Thank you so much for that, India. Now let's take a look at what's making the rounds in political cartoons. An article by the American digital media company, The Onion, has resurfaced after the murder of 19 children at an elementary school in Texas. Reporter Raf Gerster is here to tell us more. Now, Raf, what was in this article and why has it caused such a stir?
So the title of this particular article reads, "No way to prevent this," says the only nation where this regularly happens. This headline has been the same for every major mass shooting event, and this includes the mass shooting at Isla Vista in California in 2014, as well as Tuesday's school shooting in Texas. The article always quotes a fictional resident of that state lamenting a tragedy that they describe as inevitable. The article notes that such feelings are shared by tens of millions of people who live in the United States. The Onion shared its article on Twitter last Wednesday, listing every version of the piece from over the years. Thousands of people had liked and retweeted the article by midday. The article also flooded the homepage of its website with the stories, the same headline appearing over and over, but next to different photos such as a spa in Atlanta, a Walmart in El Paso, and a grocery store in Buffalo.
Here in Australia, political cartoonists have been sent into a frenzy in response to the recent federal election. So Raf, can you guide us through this media storm?
So, across many different social media platforms, the public has consistently ridiculed Scott Morrison following his election defeat. An Australian satirical news organisation called the Batuna Advocate certainly hasn't refrained from mocking the Prime Minister. Alongside a photo with Scott Morrison, the satire page on Facebook posted the remark, "Sorry we couldn't get you over the line, mate." Sarcasm has also been very prominent on Twitter as popular figures such as professional wrestler Jonah and British actor Robert Llewellyn celebrated Morrison's departure.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Raf. That's our roundup for today. Thanks to our reporters Tom Cutbush, India Curtin and Raf Gerster for the roundup. I'm Tiana Condren.
And I'm Rachel Jackson. We're going to take a short break now, then we'll be back with the weather.
Welcome back to Newsline. Joy was in the air as the Cobargo Folk Festival kicked off on the first weekend of May, following the closure of the festival for nearly 3 years. After the devastating 2019 bushfires and the COVID-19 pandemic, the community banded together to bring a weekend packed full of fun, friends and folk music. Ada Hall reports.
Folk music has always been a tale of the times, and here in Cobargo, this saying has never sung so true. Historically, folk music, which includes jazz and blues, has told stories of resistance, protest, and sweeping social change. This weekend, the festival is using music as a way to acknowledge the town's resilience after the events of the past few years.
Now, you know, we're coming back into it, and music being majorly important in the healing process of people. And so this festival was really good for Cobargo, but not only for Cobargo, it was good for all people that went. We, you know, especially the musicians, we were all looking to have a session, to play music again and have an audience. And it hasn't happened for 2 years, so everybody was very keen to do that.
The sense of unity also comes from the emerging and reoccurring volunteer base. And while the festival is a lot smaller this year, there are still many, young and old, willing to give a helping hand.
We've got these returning volunteers and they're like super stoked to be back. And they come here and they're almost like jumping out of their skin, that they're just like, we're so glad to be back. And we've got newbies as well, so having people join us and join our community, the folk community, but also be here to witness Cobargo kind of regrouping.
The festival runs over 3 days with various market stalls, food vans and activities. The folk festival boasts an impressive array of acts, with artists travelling from across Australia. As the second night closes, a dazzling fire show is performed, a magnificent end to the day. The Cobargo Folk Festival will be back early next year, welcoming all from far and wide. Ada Hall for RMIT Newsline.
Now to the weather for Melbourne and around the country with reporter Maya Van Ness.
Thanks, Jordan. In Melbourne today, rain this morning with showers set to ease this afternoon, a top of 17. Now to tomorrow's forecast for Australia's capital cities. 60% chance of rain in Melbourne, reaching 16 degrees. The nation's capital, Canberra, is looking at a shower or two and a top of 17. In Sydney, partly cloudy and 21 degrees. A shower or two predicted in Brisbane with a top of 24. Nice and sunny in Darwin, reaching 34 degrees tomorrow. In Perth, it will be mostly sunny with a top of 24. Adelaide is looking at a 70% chance of rain and a high of 17 degrees. Hobart is predicted to have a shower or two and a top of 14. Back in Melbourne, looking to the week ahead. Rain easing across the weekend, but still a cloudy couple of days here. Cold days and rain coming in for the start of the week. Monday, 90% chance of rain, a top of 13. And 95% chance of rain Tuesday with a maximum temperature of 16. Showers predicted to ease on Wednesday, but still a chilly 14 degrees. That's all for your Newsline weather. I'm Maya Van Ness. Back to you, Jordan and Sarah.
And that concludes Newsline for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sarah Liversidge.
And I'm Jordan Zock. Have a good night, Melbourne.
Believe it or not, we are probably clear.